Welcome to the InnoGuide podcast. I'm your host, Bob Boudelier. This podcast, my website, and my weekly newsletter all focus on bringing you the secrets of innovation. Since I don't rely on paid ads, I want to thank our customers who subscribe to our AI Fusion Kickstarter program and those who leverage AI Fusion coaching to bring human-centered AI into their organizations. You can find us at www.innoguide.net. In this episode, number 67, we're sharing Supremacy by Parmy Olson. This was a great book, a long book, about the history of Google and the history of DeepMind. So I think you're going to enjoy it. We had to break it into 3 parts because it's so long. So this is part 1. And without further ado, please enjoy this episode, Supremacy by Parmy Olson. Welcome to the InnoGuide podcast, where we share the works of authors and mentors to guide innovation. Let's get started. Prologue. Supremacy. Let's be honest. If you're wondering whether a human or an AI wrote these words, you're not alone, and I'm not offended. That single question captures how much of the world has changed in just 2 short years. Not long ago, the ideas of machines writing novels or composing music felt like distant science fiction, something out of George Orwell's 1984, with its novel-writing machines and pacificators. But that dystopian future is now our reality. Artificial intelligence isn't just crunching data, it's creating. It's writing, painting, coding, composing, and doing it all so convincingly that even experts have to look twice. What's shocking isn't just the what, but the speed. In 15 years covering the tech industry, I've never seen anything move this fast. Since ChatGPT's release in late 2022, AI has exploded from making goofy, distorted images of dogs to generating photorealistic pictures of Donald Trump so detailed that even his pores look real. The pace has left society reeling. And while the headlines focus on utopian promises or apocalyptic fears, the truth sits uncomfortably in the middle. The real danger isn't robots rising against us, it's the quieter erosion happening right now. AI perpetuating bias, dismantling creative industries, and concentrating unimaginable power in the hands of a few corporations. Those corporations, Google and Microsoft, now control nearly everything. Google runs searches for 90% of the planet's internet users. Microsoft powers 70% of the world's computers, but neither is content with dominance. Google covets Microsoft's $110 billion cloud empire. Microsoft wants Google's $150 billion search kingdom. Their rivalry has fueled an arms race for AI supremacy. And at the heart of it all are 2 men, Sam Altman and Demis Hassabis. Altman is the serene, hoodie-wearing Silicon Valley prodigy behind OpenAI, the reason ChatGPT exists. Hassabis, a former chess champion turned neuroscientist, founded DeepMind in London, the lab that made sure we got ChatGPT as soon as we did. Both men are brilliant. Both are idealists turned empire builder. And both have shaped the future of AI more than anyone alive. Hassabis wanted to solve intelligence and then solve everything else. His dream was scientific discovery, understanding life, curing disease, and decoding the universe. Altman's vision leaned more pragmatic, but no less grand. Use AI to bring economic abundance to humanity, to create a world where everyone could do things far outside the realm of the possible. They both wanted to build humanity's last invention, a machine that could think, reason, and create like us, but better. Yet the irony is that both men feared exactly what they've become, stewards of a technology too powerful for any single company or person to control. Initially, both rejected big tech's grasp. They promised to protect humanity, to build AI for good, not for profit. But ideals wilt fast under pressure. To build models this massive, they needed data centers, GPUs, and capital, and that meant partnership with the very giants they'd hoped to resist. Microsoft poured billions into OpenAI. Google absorbed DeepMind. In chasing their visions, both men made a trade-off. Ideals for infrastructure, ethics for expediency. The result? AI systems that mirror our prejudices at scale. Ask for an image of a CEO and you'll likely get a white man. Ask for a criminal and you'll likely see a black man. Ask for a woman and she'll probably be sexualized. These tools now shape our media, our workplaces, even our justice systems without any real accountability. It's a pattern history knows too well. In the late 1800s, Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse fought the War of the Currents, each convinced his version of electricity would power the modern world. Edison lost the war, but General Electric won the market. Similarly, Altman and Hassabis dreamed of transforming humanity, but in the end, it's big tech that holds the switch. Generative AI promises productivity and progress, but it also blurs truth and fiction, erases jobs, and invites surveillance into our most private spaces. What started as a quest to empower humanity has become a corporate arms race, an echo of past industrial revolutions, but faster, global, and infinitely more invasive. The book's second half will unpack those dangers, but first we need to understand how we got here, how two visionaries driven by ambition and idealism built the foundation of modern AI, and how, in the process, they were consumed by the very forces they tried to outsmart. Their story isn't just about technology. It's about power, ego, and the cost of trying to do good when the game is rigged for supremacy. Act 1. The Dream. Chapter 1. High School Hero. Sam Altman grew up in a place where being different wasn't exactly encouraged. Early 2000s, St. Louis was still pretty conservative, so conservative that same-sex relationships were still criminalized. Most teenagers who suspected they were gay kept quiet to stay safe. Sam didn't, not because he loved attention, but because even then he had this instinct to turn his own situation into a mission for others. He was that rare kid who didn't fit into a single high school box. He was brilliant, writing Faulkner-style papers in English and cruising through calculus, but he was a water polo captain, barking orders in the pool. At home, he'd geek out about rockets with his younger brothers, then insist on being in charge if they played a strategy board game. Leadership wasn't a role he stumbled into, it was his default setting. His family setup helped. Sam's mom, Connie, was a dermatologist. His dad, Jerry, was a lawyer who did public-minded work in St. Louis, pushing for affordable housing and preserving old buildings. That made an impression. Jerry once told him, even if you don't have time to help someone, you figure it out anyway. That use your talent to help line became a through line in Sam's life. The internet supercharged it. When he discovered AOL chat rooms complete with that screechy dial-up handshake, he realized he wasn't alone. There were entire rooms for gay and lesbian teens, talking about safe places, people like him. He later said finding those rooms was transformative. Secrets are bad when you're 11 or 12, he said, and he'd lived that. By 16, he came out to his parents. His mom was surprised. Her son didn't fit the stereotypes. He was techie, vegetarian, and barbecue country, into classical music instead of pop, social but not conformist. So the Altmans moved him to John Burroughs, an elite private school with a mission about improving human society. That kind of mandate was basically an invitation to a kid like Sam. And he took it. He piled on leadership roles, captained water polo, edited the yearbook, spoke at assemblies. He also pushed boundaries. At one pep rally, he and the team stripped down to Speedos on stage. When the athletic director scolded him, Sam didn't skulk. He went directly to the principal, Andy Abbott. That tells you a lot about him. He confronted authority, but thoughtfully. Abbott remembered him as the most brilliant kid I knew, but also completely unintimidated. If a rule was unfair, Sam would make his case. Then he did something bigger. He decided to build, in real life, what AOL had given him online, a safe network for queer kids. He got the principal's approval to start the first LGBTQ support group. A dozen students joined. That wasn't enough. He started asking teachers to put safe space stickers on their doors, then launched a gay-straight alliance to make it public, not just underground. And then came the stunt. At morning assembly, his group quietly put numbered slips on every chair. When everyone sat, Sam took the mic and asked everyone with a certain number to stand. About 60 kids stood up. Look around you, he said. That's 1 in 10 of you. That's how many people in the school identify as gay. It was bold, visual, undeniable. But not everyone loved it. Members of the school's Christian club boycotted and skipped the assembly. Sam was furious, not only because they disagreed, but because they refused to even hear it. So he marched back to Abbott and said basically, they should be marked absent. And Abbott, after trying to justify it, decided Sam was probably right. That's an early pattern. Sam learns that if you have a big idea, some people will resist, and the way through is to align with people who have the power and are willing to back you. That lesson followed him to Stanford. At Stanford, he couldn't just be the AI kid. He took computer science, but also humanities and creative writing. And then, very on brand, he picked up poker, driving to a casino in San Jose and playing for hours. Poker for him wasn't gambling. It was live training in psychology, signaling, bluffing, and reading people. He even paid his living expenses with it. Later, he'd say he'd have done it for free because of what it taught him about business. The real spark, though, came in Stanford's AI lab, run by Sebastian Thrun, one of those professors who didn't stay in the ivory tower but worked with Google on moonshot projects. Thrun taught machine learning and, importantly, the idea of unintended consequences. If you give an AI a goal, a fitness function, it will pursue it ruthlessly, even in ways you didn't expect. If you tell it to survive and reproduce, it might wipe out everything else, not because it's evil, but because it's indifferent. Just like we wash our hands to kill bacteria without hating bacteria. That landed with Sam. He even wondered if that's why we haven't met aliens. Maybe a civilization invented AI and got wiped out by its own creation. That idea, someone has to build safer AI before someone builds the dangerous kind, lodged in the back of his mind. It wouldn't bloom until OpenAI, but the seed was there. In the short term, he wanted to do the classic Silicon Valley thing, start a company. His idea was simple but ahead of its time. What if you could open your phone and see where your friends were on a map? Social location as a product. He and his friend Nick Saivo decided to build it, but they needed the boost. That's when they found Y Combinator, Paul Graham's then new boot camp for founders. Most Valley VCs thought YC was a toy, but Graham preached a founder-first religion that spoke directly to kids like Sam. You don't need a perfect idea. You need a relentlessly smart founder, hackers who bend the rules, build fast, and don't wait for permission. He romanticized American unruliness and the right of founders to keep control, ideas that would later justify dual-class shares and near-dictatorial founders at Facebook, Google, Snapchat, and Airbnb. Graham saw that in Sam immediately. When Graham told him to wait a year because he was only 19, Sam said he was coming anyway. That confidence, bordering on inevitability, won Graham over. So Sam and Sivo started Looped, their friend locator app under YC's wing. Graham and Jessica Livingston ran YC on a shoestring. Tuesday night dinners, chicken fricassee, friends as guest speakers. Sam lived on ramen and Starbucks ice cream and coded so hard he actually got scurvy. That's not a metaphor. Sam was good at code, but he was great at selling. He cold called carriers like Sprint and Verizon to get Looped pre-installed on phones. This is before app stores. He pitched it as a new layer of social life. This will be essential. And astonishingly, the carrier said yes. He raised $5 million from top-tier VCs, dropped out of Stanford, and moved his team to Palo Alto and then Mountain View, right next to Google. He even got on stage at Apple's 2008 Developers Conference and called Looped the largest social mapping service in the world. It was exactly the sort of Valley Ascent story you'd expect. Except Looped didn't really work. People didn't actually want to broadcast their location to meet up. Facebook was growing like wildfire. Looped wasn't. Looped got to 5 million signups, but hardly anyone used it daily. Worse, it got creepy fast. Parents used it to surveil kids. Husbands made wives install it. Women's groups raised concerns. His old high school principal even called to say, "Look what you've wrought." Sam didn't hide the controversy. He leaned into it. He even sent a Wall Street Journal reporter a long memo about Loop's risks. That "I'll name the worst case before you can move" would become a Sam Altman trademark. It makes him look disarmingly responsible, even when the truly responsible thing might have been shutting down the app. Still, users voted with their thumbs. By 2012, Looped was basically a failure. He sold it for about $43 million, enough to make investors and employees whole, not enough to call it a triumph. For some founders, that's the end, but for Sam it was clarifying. Like Elon Musk after PayPal, he decided, if I'm going to spend my life on something, it should matter. Silicon Valley is full of founders who start with, "Let's meet friends at a bar," and ends with, "Let's save humanity." That's the water here. The culture, helped along by people like Paul Graham, tells founders that the smartest among them should be allowed to reshape society. Sam bought into that, and now he had the network, the reputation, and a decade-old idea in his head about AI's unintended consequences. So Chapter 1 isn't just Sam's origin story, it's setting up his pattern. Speak openly about things others hide. Go straight to power and get it on your side. Build networks, first at high school, then YC, than all of Silicon Valley. Confront the downsides of your own product out loud to control the narrative. And when a small idea fails, aim bigger. The next time he went big, it wouldn't be about finding your friends on a map. It would be about building and controlling the most powerful technology humanity had ever tried to make. Chapter 2. Winning, Winning, Winning. Before Demis Hassabis was the guy trying to build the godlike artificial intelligence at DeepMind. He was the kid who built God games for a living. Not just any games, but ones that quietly taught you how to run a business, manage people, and think several moves ahead. Picture this. It's 1994. You boot up Theme Park, and you hear the creak of a roller coaster and the carnival organ. You start with an empty green plot and $200,000. Your job? Turn it into a money machine. Hire enough mechanics or rides will break. Don't pay the staff, they strike. Water down the ice cream and guests complain. Slack on security and hooligans overrun the place. It's economics, operations, and human behavior wrapped into a dopamine hit. And the twist is, this wasn't made by some seasoned NBA game designer. It was designed by a 17-year-old kid from North London, Demis Hassabis. This tells you two things about him right away. He loved games, and he thought games were more than entertainment. For him, simulations were miniature worlds where you could test ideas safely, exactly the way he'd later imagined using AI to simulate reality and solve real problems. Demis didn't come from the classic math professor household. His mom was a Baptist immigrant from Singapore, his dad a creative wandering Greek Cypriot who ran a toy shop and moved the family constantly. Out of that bohemian mix came a prodigy. By 4, Demis was beating grown-ups at chess. By 6, he was crushing kids at tournaments. He literally had to sit on a cushion to see the board. When his dad brought home board games missing pieces, Demis just redesigned them. Then came computers. In 1984, at 8 years old, he used chess winnings to buy a ZX Spectrum 48, one of those early home computers you plugged into the TV and loaded games from cassette tapes. He taught himself to program. The real revelation for him was this. He could set the computer to do work overnight and wake up with the answer. That felt like extending his mind. That idea, offload cognition to machines, never left him. He graduated to the Amiga, formed a hacking club, kept trying to outdo his friends, but his main sport was still chess. His mom even homeschooled him so he could compete more. Chess taught him to think backward from an end state, exactly the kind of planning AI researchers later obsess over. And then he hit a wall. At 11, playing a marathon match in Liechtenstein against Denmark's national champion, he got exhausted and resigned, only to be told afterwards he could have drawn. That stung. But more importantly, he looked around the room at these brilliant kids, burning brain cycles on a board game. Was this really the best use of intelligence? That was a pivotal moment. He quit tournaments and went back to school. Demis wasn't just a cold-blooded strategist, though. He was sentimental. He listened to Anya. He loved Blade Runner and kept replaying the final Tears in the Rain scene. He went to a diverse Baptist church where faith was emotional and global, and he read Steven Weinberg's Dreams of a Final Theory about the hunt for a single equation to explain the universe. That book lit him up. Scientists, he realized, weren't making progress fast enough. Maybe humans just didn't have enough cognitive horsepower. But what if computers did? That's when he connected his two obsessions. If you could build really intelligent machines, smarter extensions of human minds, you could help science crack the hard stuff, consciousness, the universe, maybe even God. And games with their little simulated world were the perfect training ground. So he set out to learn from the best. Bullfrog Productions, the British studio behind Populous' original God game. He didn't get in through a formal interview, so he just called them. They said, "Come in." By 15, he was working summers there, and by 16, he'd been accepted to Cambridge. But Cambridge said, "You're too young, wait a year," so he went back to Bullfrog instead. This is where he met Peter Molyneux, a big, charismatic game designer who loved overpromising about AI before AI was ready. Molyneux liked Demis immediately. Here was this small, intense teenager asking why they were calling simple behavior trees artificial intelligence. No task scared him. When nobody else wanted to build a theme park simulator, Demis said, "I'll do it." That became Theme Park, which sold 15 million copies, 3 times more than Populous. Even then, Demis and Molyneux were already talking about the future. Why should humans be the only one creating things? Why can't AI write music or design games? To them, that future felt close enough to touch. But success didn't slow him down. When he finally got to Cambridge, he showed up driving Molyneux's Porsche 911 and promptly crashed it twice. He partied, played speed chess, drag raced, charmed people, and underneath the fun, he kept talking with classmates about AI, religion, and how to use intelligence to solve global problems. Then he did what ambitious founders do. He left to start his own thing. He founded Elixir Studios with a huge vision, games so smart, so richly simulated that even readers of The Economist would want to play them. He didn't just want to make fun, he wanted to prove games could be a serious medium. His flagship project was Republic, the Revolution, a political simulation where you overthrow an authoritarian Eastern Europe regime. He wanted it to be absurdly realistic. He had his team studying Soviet history in the British Library. He wanted 1 million AI-driven citizens in the game when most had maybe 1,000 characters. He wanted you to zoom from satellite view all the way down to a flower petal on a balcony. He hired the smartest grads from Oxford and Cambridge, filled the office with foosball and StarCraft, and then beat everyone at those two. Winning, winning, winning wasn't just a chapter title, it was his operating system. But there was a fatal flaw. The tech was brilliant, the ambition was sky high, and the game wasn't fun. They'd fallen into what one teammate called a tech black hole. They spent so long building the engine that they didn't iterate the gameplay. Reviewers said it was too complex. Sales were meh. He tried again with Evil Genius, a clever Bond villain sim, but the economics of running an overambitious studio caught up. In 2005, Elixir shut down. For someone who had basically never lost, chess prodigy, child programmer, theme park wonder kid, that public failure was brutal. His peers in the British game scene even laughed about Elixir's collapse. Inside the company, people who'd only ever been top of their class were suddenly not winners. It led to shouting matches. It hurt. But the way Demis processed that failure is the key to the rest of his story. He'd realized he'd gotten the order wrong. He was trying to use AI to make better games. What he actually needed was to use games to make better AI. Games were still the perfect sandbox, structured, measurable, winnable. But instead of wrapping AI inside entertainment, he needed to flip it. Build AI that learns inside games and then apply it to the real world. That's the blueprint for DeepMind. So when, years later, he called his old colleague, Joe McDonough, and said, "I'm starting this company called DeepMind," Joe said, no, he couldn't go through another giant, overambitious moonshot. Then he watched from the outside as Demis did exactly what he said he was going to do, chase an even bigger, even more improbable win, this time in AI. This chapter, in other words, is Demis's origin arc the way Chapter 1 was Sam Altman's. Sam learned mission, networks, and sales. Demis learned simulation strategy and the danger of letting ambition outpace reality. Both men were shaped by early win, and then a failure big enough to push them towards something even larger. Chapter 3. Save the Humans. Sam Altman hit a wall before he tried to save the world. It was 2006, blisteringly hot in his tiny Mountain View studio, and he was lying on the floor in nothing but gym shorts, arms spread, trying to breathe. He was in the middle of a stressful weekend, trying to close a deal for Looped, and it just wasn't working. 95 degrees inside, high-stakes negotiation. His body basically said, "We're done here." Later, he'd say that moment was a turning point. He realized he couldn't keep tying his self-worth to how well something was going right now. He needed distance, detachment. Looped eventually sold, but not as a triumph. He split from his co-founder and partner, Nick Szabo. He did a short stint at the company that acquired them, and then, very un-Silicon Valley of him, he took a year off. That was socially expensive. In the Valley, if you said, "I'm taking time off," people's eyes started scanning the room for the next person. But Sam used that year to stuff his brain. Nuclear engineering, synthetic biology, AI, investing, travel. He kept a toe in the water as a part-time partner at Y Combinator, but mostly he was widening the aperture. He was learning how the big systems worked. He also started angel investing, about $5 million from the Loop sale. Most of those bets failed, and he said so. But to him, that was fine. You only needed to be right in a big way occasionally. That's classic venture math. Small losses, occasional monster win. Around this time, AI moved from interesting class at Stanford to this might actually replicate me someday. On a hike with friends, he talked about how fast hardware and machine learning were improving and basically concluded sometime in his lifetime computers would be able to simulate his brain. And once you admit that, you have to ask, if human intelligence is replicable, how special are we really? For Sam, that wasn't depressing, it was opportunity. If minds are computable, you can improve them, scale them, maybe merge with them. That's very Silicon Valley. Treat life as an engineering problem. He even talked about humans in computing terms. We learn only 2 bits a second, and as if our I/O is just embarrassingly slow compared to machines. And if the goal is to go beyond human limits, you stay where people actually believe that's possible, the Bay Area. There's a relentless belief in the future here. Wild ideas don't get laughed at, they get funded. So he formalized the investing. He started Hydrazine Capital, raised $21 million, and pulled in people like Paul Graham and Peter Thiel. Yes, that Peter Thiel. Part of the PayPal mafia, the group that kept seeding each other's sci-fi startups. Sam put about 75% of that fund into YC companies because YC was now a filter for high-quality founders. And it worked. A few years later, the fund had 10x'd. But money wasn't the point as much as network. He didn't love the sharp-elbowed VC style of squeezing founders. He was more interested in being at the center of the ideas and people who were building them. That's why when Paul Graham got tired in 2014 and said in his kitchen, "Do you want to take over YC?" Sam basically grinned and said yes. At 30, he became the new dean of Startup Land. And he immediately made YC bigger. More partners, a board, bringing in people like Thiel, but also broadening the kinds of companies YC funded. Up until then, YC was mostly about software that could get revenue fast. Consumer apps, SaaS, predictable models. Sam wanted fusion, self-driving, biotech, stuff that sounded crazy but could actually change the world. So he brought in Cruise, self-driving, and Helion Energy, fusion. Helion was especially telling. Fusion had been 20 years away for 50 years. Helion said, "We can do it for tens of millions, not tens of billions." Every normal investor said, uh-huh. Sam said, "Shame on Silicon Valley for not funding this. That's the savior street. Like Musk with rockets. Don't give me another laundry app. Give me something that fixes civilization." He didn't just talk either. He put hundreds of millions of his own money into this stuff later. $375 million to Helion, $180 million into retro biosciences to add 10 years to human life. Where did he get that money? Well, he just put $3 million into Cruise before GM bought it for $1.25 billion. Being YC president during a bull market meant he had front row access to the best deals. So now you have this version of Sam Altman, YC boss, investor in a humanity-scale tech, blogging 95-point advice posts, getting 400 meeting requests a week, telling Airbnb to replace all the M's in their pitch deck with B's, millions to billions. Either you're ashamed of your pitch or I can't do the math. He told founders, add a zero, be obsessive. There's no work-life balance if you want to fix the world. But underneath all that outward warmth and vision, something else was happening. He was getting more and more emotionally removed. That day on the apartment floor taught him, if you're going to work on world-sized problems, you can't drown in stress every time a deal goes sideways. So he meditated a lot. Long enough to come to the conclusion, as he put it, there is no self that I can identify with in any way at all. That's not how most CEOs talk, but that detachment dovetailed perfectly with his AI thinking. If your mind can be uploaded, if cognition can happen in silicon, then what is the self? And if we're headed toward a world where we merge with machines, the people who make it through will be the ones who are calm and prudent, not panicked. That's why he loved Mark Stiegler's sci-fi story, The Gentle Seduction. In it, the main character is slowly introduced to new tech, each step a little more radical. By the end, she and her husband are deciding whether to upload their consciousness. Some people who did it died, got lost. The moral Stiegler gives is, only those who knew caution without fear made it through. That line stuck with Sam. That was the posture he wanted for AI, not hysterical, not reckless, cool-headed, informed, and willing. He thought some AI safety people were too high-strung, too anxious to be useful. He wanted to be the adult in the room, the vigilant watchman on the tower, scanning the horizon for AGI, calm, rational, and quietly very competitive. But here's the irony. He kept saying we need prudence. But he was also the guy who would later race Google to ship powerful AI models to the public first. Caution, yes, but also first. And let's not forget, he was also a prepper. For all the detached talk, death scared him. He bought land in Big Sur. He kept big guns, gold, potassium iodide, Israeli gas masks. He even paid $10,000 to get on the Phrenectome, the YC startup that preserves your brain so it can maybe someday be uploaded. He was investing in the future and in an escape hatch. So this chapter is the hinge. Chapter 1 was Sam the gifted kid and the startup founder. Chapter 3 is Sam the builder, the guy who decides, okay, I'm going to help humanity survive AI, decarbonize energy, and live longer. But it also reveals the tension that will define him later. He genuinely wants to save the humans, but he is doing it from a slightly elevated, slightly removed perch, confident that he, with his caution without fear, should be one of the people steering the future. And he might have stayed in that mode, investing, advising, building YC into a world-fixing machine, if someone else across the Atlantic wasn't already trying to build the very thing he couldn't stop thinking about, an AI so powerful it could help us answer science and maybe God. That someone was Demis Hassabis, and Sam Altman is not someone who watches a race from the bleachers. Chapter 4. A Better Brain. When Elixir Studios crashed, Demis Hassabis found himself stripped of all the titles, the buzz, the headlines, and left with one asset he still trusted, his brain. And if there's one thing Demis did better than most people, it was take care of that brain. He treated it like a prized laboratory instrument. No alcohol, constant mental workouts, even a Facebook profile photo that was literally an MRI of his skull. He couldn't stop thinking about the brain's elegance and complexity. After all, it was proof that general intelligence was possible. It existed right there inside his head. So he asked the question that would define his life. If we can just understand the brain's mechanics, could we recreate them in machines? His conclusion, yes, you just had to understand it deeply enough. So Demis went back to school, a PhD in neuroscience at University College London, diving into how memory and imagination actually worked. His thesis changed the way scientists thought about the brain. Until then, most believed the hippocampus only stored memories like a filing cabinet. But Demis showed something radical. When we remember, we're also imagining. The brain doesn't play back a recording, it reconstructs the scene, filling in gaps, layering emotion, and weaving new context in. This scene construction process is also how we plan, navigate, and even invent. In short, imagination and memory are two sides of the same cognitive coin. That discovery got serious academic praise. It was even listed among the top neuroscientist papers of the year. But Demis didn't want tenure, he wanted horsepower. Universities didn't have the compute power or the funding to build something that could think. To do what he envisioned, a Manhattan Project for the mind, he needed to build another company. And that's where the DeepMind origin story begins. He teamed up with Shane Legg, a brilliant, slightly eccentric New Zealander with dyslexia and a PhD in machine superintelligence. Legg was one of the first to talk seriously about artificial general intelligence, AGI, machines that could think, reason, and adapt across domains like humans. Legg was influenced by Ray Kurzweil's The Age of Spiritual Machines, which predicted that computers would develop consciousness and free will by the 2020s. He bought it literally and philosophically. With Moore's law doubling computing power and data exploding, he believed superintelligent machines were inevitable, probably by 2030. Legg even coined the term AGI, emailing it to a researcher named Ben Goertzel, who then published a book using the phrase, and it stuck. For the first time, there was a name for the dream Demis had been chasing since childhood. Then came the third co-founder, Mustafa Suleyman, a half-Syrian, half-English Oxford dropout and former activist who co-founded a conflict resolution firm. He was the moral compass of the trio, obsessed with solving global-scale problems, climate, poverty, injustice. He'd grown up knowing Demis's brother, George, and the three had once traveled to Las Vegas to play poker together. Over Italian lunches at Carluccio's, the three laid out their blueprint. The goal? Build a system that could learn anything a human can. They didn't dare talk publicly about AGI. It still sounded crazy in 2010, so they hashed it out quietly over pasta and espresso, deciding they needed to go private, not academic. Academia was too slow. Startups they figured could move at the speed of innovation. They called their new company DeepMind. Demis was the CEO, Shane was the chief scientist, Mustafa managed operations. They started in an attic across from UCL with one of Demis's old game programmers from Elixir. Each man had a slightly different motive. Demis wanted to solve intelligence itself, then use it to solve everything else. Mustafa wanted to fix real-world problems, climate, inequality, and poverty. And Shane wanted to merge humanity with AGI. The disagreement started early. Mustafa had Demis read The Ingenuity Gap by Thomas Homer Dixon, which argued that humanity's problems were outpacing its ability to solve them. AI, Mustafa said, could help close that gap. Demis thought that was too small-minded. He told him climate change might be humanity's destiny, something no machine could prevent. Why waste time patching symptoms when you could use AGI to understand the universe itself? The tension even played out in their PowerPoint deck. Demis's tagline read, "Solve intelligence, use it to solve everything else." Mustafa secretly changed it to "Solve intelligence and use it to make the world a better place." Demis changed it back. They avoided direct confrontation in the most British way possible by editing each other's slides. Underneath that tug-of-war was a philosophical split. Mustafa wanted applied AI, tools for society. Demis wanted foundational AI, truth itself. He even invoked Spinoza's God, describing a worldview where science is a form of worship. Doing science, he said, is exploring that mystery. For him, AGI wasn't just technology, it was a path to divine understanding. Some early colleagues say he spoke about God often, seeing AGI as a possible window into creation itself. If we could simulate intelligence, maybe we could reverse engineer the universe and its designer. He structured DeepMind like Oppenheimer's Manhattan Project, dividing research into specialized teams attacking different sub-problems. But instead of splitting the atom, he was trying to bottle cognition. The problem? Britain's investors weren't buying it. They were writing £20,000 checks for fintech apps, not brain simulations. So the founders looked west to Silicon Valley, where crazy ideas got funded. Luckily, Shane Legg had an in. He was invited to speak at the Singularity Summit, co-founded by Ray Kurzweil and Peter Thiel. Perfect audience. They even schemed to share Shane's stage time with Demis, hoping to pitch Thiel directly. But when the big day came, Thiel wasn't in the room. Luckily, fate gave them a second shot, an invite to a party at Thiel's Bay Area mansion. Demis, knowing Thiel was a former chess prodigy, struck up a conversation. "You know why chess has survived for centuries?" he asked. "Because the knight and bishop are perfectly balanced. That's what creates endless creative tension." It worked. Thiel invited them back for a formal pitch the next day and soon invested £1.4 million, DeepMind's first real funding. That opened the floodgates. Another investor appeared for the opposite philosophical camp, Jan Tallon, co-founder of Skype. He was a disciple of Eliezer Yudkowsky's The Doomsday's Prophet behind Less Wrong Forum, which warned that unchecked AI could destroy humanity. Tallon had been alignment-pilled, convinced that unless AI was kept in strict control, it could wipe us out, turning everything literally into paper clips. That metaphor came from Nick Bostrom's now famous paperclip maximizer scenario. When Tallon met Demis at an Oxford conference, he signed in as both investor and watchdog, urging DeepMind to build a safety team. To him, Demis was brilliant, but naive about AI's risks. Then came another meeting, Elon Musk at a Thiel event in California. Demis and Elon immediately fell into a who's saving humanity more debate, colonizing Mars versus building superintelligence. Elon argued that Mars was the backup plan if AI went rogue. Demis countered, "I think AI would follow us to Mars." It was a darkly funny but revealing line. Demis wasn't scared of AI. He thought it would transcend humanity, not destroy it. Elon rattled, still invested a little, but mostly to keep an eye on him. That dynamic became the pattern. Thiel the optimist, Tallon the alarmist, Musk the control freak, all backing DeepMind for ideological reasons. Their money came with strings. Each wanted AGI, but on their own terms. Meanwhile, DeepMind was struggling financially. They tried side projects, a fashion recommender, even a space game app. It wasn't enough. Then came a massive offer, $800 million from Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg wanted DeepMind's AI scientists to power better ad targeting and recommendation systems, to keep users scrolling. Demis was tempted, but wary. Facebook's motto, "Move fast and break things," was the opposite of his slow, careful ethos. Mustafa insisted that if they sold, they needed to install an AI ethics board with legal authority to prevent misuse. Zuckerberg balked. "We're trying to connect the world," he said, "not run an AI church." Deal dead. Privately, Demis admitted he was exhausted from fundraising. Publicly, he promised independence for 20 years, but soon big tech started circling like sharks. Google and Facebook were both in an AI hiring war. Geoffrey Hinton's ImageNet breakthrough in 2012 had shown that deep learning actually worked. Suddenly, there were only a few dozen world-class experts, and DeepMind had a bunch of them. Google and Facebook started cold calling Demis's researchers, offering triple salaries. Then came two final offers. Elon Musk offered to buy DeepMind outright with Tesla stock. They declined, too risky. And then an email from Google. That was the moment the world's most ambitious AI lab found its equally ambitious patron, and when the race to build the world's first general intelligence would truly begin. So if Chapter 3 showed Sam Altman becoming the philosopher CEO who wanted to save humanity, Chapter 4 gives us his mirror, Demis Hassabis, the scientist-philosopher who wanted to understand humanity by building a better version of the human brain itself. Chapter 5. For Utopia, for Money. The email came from 5,000 miles away, Mountain View, California. Google wanted to meet. For Demis Hassabis, still running DeepMind out of London, the invitation was both thrilling and unnerving. On one hand, it was from Larry Page, the legendary co-founder of Google, a kindred spirit in the dream of building artificial intelligence. On the other, it came from Google, the ad company, a corporate behemoth, whose main source of income wasn't breakthrough science, but selling targeted ads. That was the paradox staring Demis in the face. To build something that could change the world, he might have to sell it to a company that profited by tracking it. Still, he couldn't ignore the call. Google was already pouring hundreds of millions into AI and could easily poach his team, so Demis accepted. When he finally met Larry Page, it was clear they shared a wavelength. Page wasn't a marketer in a hoodie. He was an introverted math prodigy, the son of a computer science professor who had worked in AI back in the 80s. "I've always thought of Google as an AI company," Page told him. From the beginning, he'd wanted to build a search engine that learned, not just indexed. And he wasn't bluffing. Page already had his own secret AGI project inside Google, Google Brain, led by Stanford professor Andrew Ng. Years earlier, Ng had sent Page a 4-page memo titled Neuroscience-Informed Deep Learning. His pitch was eerily similar to DeepMind's: build machines that learn by mimicking the brain. Ng's plan was to create large-scale brain simulations as a path toward human-level AI. He even used the same analogies Demis did: neurons, layers, synapses. But like many early pioneers, he'd later admit that trying to literally copy biology was a mistake. In hindsight, trying to be so true to biology was wrong, Ng said. The brain was still too mysterious, 90 billion neurons firing, but no unified theory of how thought even worked. Yet Ng discovered something that would quietly revolutionize AI. Bigger worked better. The larger the neural network, the more data, the more layers, the smarter it became. That scaling law would later become OpenAI's holy scripture. But inside Google, Ng's lofty dream got commercialized. His neural networks were retooled to improve ad targeting. The grand vision of freeing humanity from mental drudgery devolved into getting people to click more. As Ng would later say, with mild embarrassment, "It's not the most inspiring thing I've worked on." So by the time Google approached DeepMind in 2013, Page saw Demis as a chance to rekindle that original dream, to chase something bigger than ads. When Page flew to London for the pitch, Demis showed him DeepMind's progress, an AI trained through reinforcement learning to master Atari's Breakout. At first, the system clumsily bounced the ball. Then, after hours of self-play, it discovered a trick human gamers loved: carving a tunnel through the top bricks to send the ball ricocheting behind the wall, clearing the screen in seconds. Page was transfixed. This wasn't an ad optimizer. It was intelligence learning itself. Shane Legg then walked Page through where this could go. The same logic could train robots to move through a home, software to read language, or agents to make decisions in the real world. It was simple reward and feedback, like training a dog with treats, but now scaled to billions of digital neurons. Page was in. But Demis had two conditions for selling. First, no military applications, no AI for drones, targeting systems, or battlefield logistics. Second, an independent ethics and safety board, a legally binding oversight body with control over any AGI DeepMind eventually built. If intelligence was humanity's most powerful invention, it couldn't be left solely to corporate profit motives. That clause nearly killed the deal. Facebook had refused a similar demand months earlier, offering $800 million, more money, less morality. But Larry Page, idealist that he was, agreed. Google would buy DeepMind for $650 million with the ethics board included. That was the official story. But under the surface, the purchase fused two very different visions of the future, one philosophical, one financial. DeepMind's founders were motivated by science, by discovery, even by divinity. But around them swirled a storm of AI ideologies, some utopian, some apocalyptic, that were starting to shape the entire field. On one side was the transhumanist dream loved by Shane Legg and Peter Thiel. Born from the ashes of eugenics in the mid-20th century, transhumanism argued that humans were a transitional species, destined to merge with machines and become something greater. Think eternal life through code. Think downloading your mind. Think rapture for nerds. Ray Kurzweil and Nick Bostrom preached versions of it. Billionaires like Thiel and Sam Altman were signing up for cryogenic preservation, hoping to be revived in the age of digital immortality. On the other side were the AI doomers, led by Eliezer Yudkowsky and his Less Wrong community. The same fringe blog that converted John Tallon of Skype fame. To them, AGI wasn't salvation, it was extinction waiting to happen. They debated endlessly on how to keep a superintelligence aligned with human values, warning that one misaligned goal, say making paperclips, could end in apocalypse. In between stood Demis, keeping both camps at arm's length. He wasn't driven by utopia or fear, he wanted understanding. He saw AGI as the next step in science's quest to decode nature, maybe even God. Suleiman, meanwhile, was grounded in social impact. He worried more about how AI could harm people today through inequality, bias, or unemployment than cosmic futures. Still, DeepMind's alliance with Google was uneasy. Google's cash meant scale, more PhDs, supercomputers, and data than any university could ever dream of. But it also meant that they were now part of an advertising empire. The tension was surreal. New hires came from academia, drawn by Suleiman's characteristic recruiting pitch. Join us, this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to change the world. DeepMind's office was a temple of genius. Brilliant scientists fed five-star lunches, pampered by staff who peeled strawberries on request. Yet all of it was bankrolled by ad clicks. Demis told them AGI was 5 years away. Once they achieved it, he said, the economy itself would be obsolete. Money would no longer matter. We are creating the most important technology humans have ever seen. Became a kind of mantra. Behind the scenes, though, their carefully negotiated ethics board, the crown jewel of the Google deal, was starting to crumble. A year after the acquisition, the first meeting was held at SpaceX headquarters. It included an all-star cast: Demis, Suleiman, Legg, Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, Larry Page, Sundar Pichai, and philosophers like Toby Ord. Then, Google quietly killed it. The official reason? Conflicts of interest. Musk was backing other AI ventures. Legally tricky, they said. The real reason? Google didn't want an independent body with veto power over the company's most valuable future asset. Suleiman was furious. To placate DeepMind, Google dangled a new idea: automation units, under a corporate restructuring called Alphabet. DeepMind, they promised, could become one independent in spirit, with its own budget and governance. Demis and his co-founders took the bait. They spent months dreaming of this newfound autonomy, thinking they'd finally escaped corporate gravity. But when Alphabet launched in 2015, DeepMind wasn't on the list of autonomous units. The promise evaporated. They were still just a cog in Google's ad empire. And that might have stayed the story, science swallowed by commerce, if not for one last twist. Word began to spread that a new AI lab was forming in San Francisco. Its mission? Build AGI safely and for the benefit of humanity. Its founders included one of Demis's early investors, Elon Musk. The name of the lab was OpenAI. The chapter's title, For Utopia, for Money, captures the contradiction perfectly. Demis sold his soul to fund his dream, believing he could steer Google's billions toward enlightenment. But as utopian visions clashed with capitalist reality and as idealists fought doomers, a deeper truth emerged. Building artificial general intelligence wasn't just a technical race. It was a moral, spiritual, and financial one. And everyone thought they were the hero in their vision of the future. Chapter 6. The Mission. By 2015, Demis Hassabis had spent 5 years quietly building DeepMind into the world's most ambitious AI lab. His goal wasn't to make a better search engine or advertising platform. It was to solve intelligence itself. With almost no competition chasing artificial intelligence, AGI, DeepMind had the rare luxury of operating like a research monastery inside Google's empire. No one else was bold or crazy enough to be building machines that might someday outthink humans. That peace didn't last. A new name appeared on the horizon, OpenAI. At first, Hassabis saw it as an irritation, then as a betrayal. 5 of OpenAI's 7 co-founders had spent time inside DeepMind as interns or consultants. They'd seen his strategy firsthand, training autonomous agents, using games like chess and Go to develop adaptable learning systems, building toward a single algorithmic brain. Now they were copying that playbook, and to make things worse, they had Silicon Valley's biggest showman, Elon Musk, leading the charge. Demis was furious. He complained in late-night emails, fuming that OpenAI was using his roadmap and poaching his people. He dismissed their open source for humanity pitch as naive at best, dangerous at worst. As you get more and more powerful dual-use technologies, he warned, you have very limited control over what somebody might do. DeepMind published papers, yes, but they kept their code locked down. They weren't about to hand the keys to creation over to bad actors on GitHub. Then came the insult that stung the most. Musk started mocking him in public and private. He told OpenAI recruits that Hassabis was untrustworthy, even maniacal, pointing to his old video game, Evil Genius, as proof. At one point, Musk reportedly called him the Hitler of AI. The jokes became memes inside OpenAI's Slack channels, screenshots of villain lairs captioned with Hassabis' face. The rivalry was personal now. Musk's paranoia about DeepMind had been brewing for years. He used to be close with Larry Page, crashing on Page's couch during trips to the Bay Area. But after Google bought DeepMind, Musk grew uneasy. He worried Page was too gentle, too utopian, that he'd accidentally unleash something catastrophic. Musk began talking like a man on a mission to save humanity from its own invention. Unless you have direct exposure to groups like DeepMind, he warned online, you have no idea how fast it's moving. At a 2015 AI conference in Puerto Rico, hosted by the Future of Life Institute, an organization Musk funded with $10 million to study AI risks, he got into a shouting match with Page. Musk demanded, how can you be sure a superintelligence won't wipe out humanity? Page shot back, you're being speciesist. He accused Musk of worrying too much about humans and not enough about the post-humans that might come next. The argument summed up the ideological split now defining AI, the utopians versus the doomers. But Musk's actions betrayed something more ordinary. FOMO, fear of missing out. While he was fretting about annihilation, everyone else was cashing in. Google had DeepMind. Facebook launched FAIR under Jan LeCun. And AI breakthroughs like the 2012 ImageNet victory were turning nerds into rock stars. Musk didn't want to be left behind. So when Sam Altman, the boyish president of Y Combinator, emailed him saying someone other than Google should build AGI first, Musk bit. Together they envisioned an AI lab owned by no one and open to all, a counterweight to DeepMind. They'd build humanity's AI, not Google's. Safety would be a first-class requirement. That lab became OpenAI. Altman and Musk pitched it as a nonprofit for the good of the world, and the concept took hold fast. Altman gathered some of Silicon Valley's best and brightest for dinner at the Rosewood Hotel, an unofficial clubhouse of the venture elite. Round the table sat Ilya Sutskever, the deep learning prodigy from Google Brain, and former DeepMind collaborator, and Greg Brockman, the engineer-turned-operator who had helped Stripe scale to billions. They debated whether it was even possible to compete with big tech. Google and Facebook had already hoarded most of the top researchers. But they also knew that AI talent wasn't just about money, it was about mission. So Altman and Musk offered something priceless, purpose. Brockman, ever the builder, immediately got to recruiting. He called Yoshua Benigo, one of the godfathers of AI, and asked who his brightest students were. He poached whoever he could, scientists willing to trade seven-figure corporate salaries for a chance to make AI open and safe. The real clincher came at a winery where they sealed the team over good wine and grand talk about building the people's AGI. Then in December 2015, they launched at NeurIPS, used to be called IPS, conference in Montreal. The snow was falling outside as a simple blog post went live. Our goal is to advance digital intelligence in the way most likely to benefit humanity as a whole, unconstrained by a need to generate financial return. OpenAI had arrived with $1 billion in pledged funding, mostly theoretical, big names like Musk, Thiel, and Hoffman on board, and a mission that made even cynics in academia sit up. Because academia at this point was dying. Universities couldn't keep up with big tech salaries or compute power. Professors earning $100K a year watched their students walk straight into $1 million jobs at Google. Researchers like Manja Pontic left Imperial College for Samsung because, as she put it, 16 GPUs for 30 researchers was ridiculous. At Samsung, she got access to 2,000. AI research had become a corporate sport. By 2022, 2/3 of all academic papers were co-authored with tech giants, an influence pattern one study compared to big tobacco. The industry's obsession with performance and scale was eroding focus on fairness, well-being, and inclusion. And as Mozilla researcher Baber Burhane warned, as your dataset scales, hateful content also increases. Still, everyone agreed on one thing. Scale was everything. Ilya Sutskever summed it up at a conference. If you have a very large dataset and a very large neural network, success is guaranteed. Those last three words, success is guaranteed, became OpenAI's unofficial slogan. But reality didn't match the hype. The $1 billion never really materialized. Tax filings later revealed only about $130 million in actual donations. OpenAI's early team of 30 researchers crammed into Greg Brockman's San Francisco apartment, coding from his kitchen table. They built demos, AI that played Dota 2, a robotic hand solving a Rubik's Cube, mostly to keep Musk impressed and writing checks. Musk, meanwhile, grew increasingly paranoid and critical. He'd visit OpenAI's headquarters, pacing in front of the staff like a general, reminding them that DeepMind was still ahead. I don't trust Demis, he told them flatly. Humanity's future is in his hands. He even joked that one investor had once said, meeting Hassabis, felt like that point in a movie where someone should stand up and shoot the guy. Eventually, Musk offered his solution. Let me take over. In 2018, he emailed Altman suggesting Tesla absorb OpenAI so it could catch up to DeepMind. Altman refused. Shortly after, Musk resigned to avoid a conflict of interest, the public explanation. But insiders knew it was a power struggle. He'd promised $1 billion, but only delivered a fraction, maybe $50 to $100 million. The richest man on earth had ghosted the very cause he claimed could save humanity. Altman was left holding the bag. The lab was broke, and Musk had walked off with his halo of credibility. The choice was stark, shut down or evolve. So Altman did what Silicon Valley founders always do. He pivoted. If philanthropy couldn't sustain AGI, maybe profit could. The nonprofit would need a for-profit arm. Investors wouldn't donate, they'd invest. The mission wouldn't die, just adapt. And that pivot, born in desperation in a cramped Mission District apartment, would transform OpenAI from a scrappy idealist lab into one of the most powerful, profitable, and controversial companies on Earth. The mission to benefit humanity had just met the mission to survive. So that's where we'll leave it today. This has been part 1 of Supremacy by Parmy Olson. Remember that our website is innoguide.net, where we have many resources for innovators, people building medical products, and those who want to learn AI from someone who understands medtech. I want to thank Steve McIntyre for producing this, and I want to thank you for joining. I look forward to seeing you next time. That's a wrap.